that is a pretty little document that has 5 mindset pillars of change, okay? So the first thing I want you to think about is if you are new to coming up with an idea and having it stick, right? You may have had really successful times in your past where you're like, I was sticking with my habit, I was sticking with my routine, whether that was going for walks or getting active or making your meals and just getting really clear on what your goal is, and then you fell off the wagon. First of all, I just want to remind you that that's the ebb and flow of life, and often we're just in comparison mode with other people because they're able to keep it going and we're like, why can't I? Then we start to get into this phase of like, beating ourselves up. But I want to remind you that anytime you're looking at taking on a new challenge, hello, whoever is joining, nice to see you. Pop in, hello, who you are, and collect evidence that you've succeeded before. Okay, so this is the first step. This is key because you have so many successes under your belt, my friend. You have a lifetime of successes under your belt. And when you think about the word success, it may not feel like a success, but let me remind you that there was a time where you didn't know how to drive a vehicle. There was a time where you didn't know how to cook a decent meal for your family. You had to learn how to do it when you were younger. There was a time where you didn't even know how to walk, right? And we take for granted all these things that we know how to do and have become part of everyday life, and they become habitual and a ritual in our life. Yet we succeeded in them because we're human and we learn and we adapt and we're persevering all the time. So if there is a time where you in the past tried something out in your health journey and it so failed, like you feel like it failed, let me remind you it didn't fail. It's just something shifted in your mind and got you off track, and that you can always get back on the train. So collecting evidence that you succeeded before is actually going to plant in your mind and trick your subconscious to say, hey, I have succeeded before in something completely unrelated to doing a bunch of exercise or getting active, going outside. But I can do it again, and this is what it took from me. I understand that I can do that, and I am capable of that. And all it takes is one piece of evidence to get your mind into that headspace of, you know what? I know that I can do this. And if I don't know how to do it today, I can learn, and I can ask for help. I can enlist support for this, whether that's a family member or a friend or coworker, coach, counselor, whoever you have in your life. You can have someone keep you accountable, but also support you on that journey and help you understand what it is that you truly want to do. Because there's desires that we have on our minds and in our hearts all the time. And what holds us back from them is thinking that we just can't. But I'm going to remind you, yes, you can. All right? So one piece of evidence, have it in your mind. What did I do before? How did I get there? What were the steps I took? And can I take action again? Absolutely, you can. Okay? Number 2. Now, as you go to do that, something's going to pop up in your mind, and it's going to be around fear. It's going to be an element of fear, whether that's doubt, feeling anxious, feeling nervous, feeling like, I've tried this so many times and it doesn't work. It's almost an imposter feeling, and you're actually sabotaging your efforts before you even get started. So let me remind you that you can take action on this by simply replacing fear with curiosity. All right? What's fun about curiosity? Curiosity is playful. Curiosity is like when you were a kid and you were like, I don't know how to use the VCR, but it's got some buttons, and I'm going to push some buttons and see what happens, right? And we hear that sound, the rewind sound, and we're like, oh, what's that doing, right? And then it could get jammed in the machine. We get in trouble from our parents, but that's beside the point. You're curious as a kid. You're always learning. You're always growing. You're always pushing yourself forward. And when you're curious, you can't be in fear. because you can say these 3 words to yourself. Are you ready for it? Isn't that interesting? Why do those 3 words matter? Isn't that interesting? Write it down, put it in your phone, write it down wherever you are. Isn't that interesting that I think I can't go for walks this week? Isn't that interesting that I think I don't have time for myself at all because I'm just so busy with everything with my family? Isn't that interesting that I don't think I can throw together a healthy meal, even though I have lots of groceries and I have things in my pantry? I just maybe don't feel so confident in my cooking abilities. When you can take a step back from that and have like a bird's eye view for just a minute, you're observing yourself. And when you observe yourself, you're not in judgment. And fear stems from judgment. Okay? So replace the fear with curiosity. Isn't that interesting? And see where your mind takes you. Have some fun with it. Talk to your kids about things that are challenging you or challenging them. And just look at the idea, how can I be curious about this instead of judgmental against myself or against others? All right, so that's number 2. Number 3 is the value check and the deep why. All right, you've probably heard this 1,000,001 times, but if you don't have a why behind you with any sort of goal or ambition or plan, you're likely to not stick with it. It's got to be the why that makes you cry. Now, you don't have to cry necessarily, but it has to be something that gets you. It has to get you at like that visceral level where you're like, oh, I just know I'm meant to do this. I know that I'm meant to make this happen for myself because I know it's time. I have evidence that I've done it before and that I can do it again even better. That value check is checking in with yourself, like, what do I want to prioritize and why? What do I want my values to represent in my life? Whether it's to do with health habits or the way that you communicate with somebody or the way you show up at work, or maybe it's the way you show up with your family. Check in with yourself and check in what your values are. And if you're in alignment with them, great. And if something is out, that's generally where stress is coming in your life because you're not in touch with your values. That's why silence and meditation and just being really present with yourself can be so helpful because it allows you, when you're not in a space of judgment, to just observe what's going on with your thoughts. And am I following my why right now, or am I off base? And when you're off base, that's when the growth comes in because you're like, oh, I get to get curious here. What's the real answer? How can I do this? Know your deep why. Share it with others and let them reinforce to you what your why is so you can live it out and feel it at a deep level so that when you are about to start your project or your new habit, your new routine, or you're looking at a new challenge in some way, you have that to go back to and say, okay, I'm capable of this. Number 4, this is a big one. I want you to acknowledge future gremlins that are about to come. Whenever you step into any sort of change, there's going to be thoughts coming up here and nattering things going on in your brain that are going to say, yeah, right. No, that's not you. You can't do that. And talking you out of it. And that's part of your conscience. That's part of your lens of life. That it's just speaking back to you from previous experiences. And I want to remind you that your previous experiences don't have to dictate your future. Your previous experiences are there to share with you a lesson. Many lessons. My gosh, the amount of lessons that you've learned in your life, if you think about them. The reason you have progress today is because of the amount of lessons you've learned. So really take that to heart, that you are okay wherever you're at right now. And no matter what change you implement, your brain is meant to protect you. Your brain is going to say, okay, I know this is gonna be hard. But you know what? There's a part of you that still is sparkly and is like, wants to stick their hand up and say, but let me play, let me play. That's your time when you get to come in and acknowledge that gremlin in your mind and say, hey, I appreciate you. I acknowledge you for protecting me all this time, but guess what? It's someone else's turn right now. And that's the courageous lion inside of me that's ready to move. Okay? So acknowledging is not demeaning. Acknowledging is noticing and giving validation to that part of you, right? Whenever you acknowledge a part of you or acknowledge someone else or acknowledging yourself, it's a real honor because it sees you. It sees whoever you're focused on. It doesn't judge. It just shows up and is like, I see you. Okay? So come at me, gremlins. Come at me. Even as I'm doing this live video, no one's showing up live. And I'm like, I'm just chatting with myself. I don't know if this is going to do anything. But I have to tell myself, one person might hear this and it might change their day. It might change the course of their month ahead. It might make a difference for someone in their family or plant a seed. So I'm here doing that in my daughter's bedroom. That's my gremlin acknowledgement right there. Okay? If you're still with me, thank you. I'm going through the top five key mindset pillars of change. And this is the number 5 one. Okay? You get to be a beginner. Be okay with being a beginner. Because at any point in your life that you've learned something new and now mastered the skill, you once had to start at 0. You were not the hero. We don't go from 0 to hero immediately. And you know this. So be okay with being a beginner. And you know, the best person to teach you that and show you the ropes of that is your kids. Your kids get to show you what it's like to be a beginner in so many things. Like, my daughters are 11 and 7, and even the smallest things, like Brianna's learning to put her hair in a ponytail these days. And it takes every ounce of patience in me to be like, I'm not going to fix it. I'm not going to fix it. I'm going to let her keep that the way it is because she's doing it herself. She's super proud of it. Or my older daughter is doing some really incredible stuff with school and trying out like new dances with this class she's in, but learning things like about science and like just trying things out. And I, of course, don't want to come in there and be like, oh, well, this is the proper way to do it. What we want to do is be like, hey, you're a beginner. You're learning. I'm proud of you. I see you. I acknowledge you. And you get to keep going. And yes, you can. So, recap. 5 key pillars. Collect evidence that you've succeeded before. 2, replace fear with curiosity. Isn't that interesting? I forgot number 2. 3, value check in the deep why. Okay? What's the why? What is it? What really drives you? Number 4, acknowledge those future gremlins that are going to drive you batty and give them some love and tell them to sit down. And number 5, be okay with being a beginner. So that's what I had for you. If you liked this video, if this is something that is helpful for you, please let me know what stands out for you. I'd love to know, and I'm going to be sharing this in other capacities. I do have a YouTube channel. And, but I want to do these lives for you guys every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I put that into my calendar. I built it into a plan so that it will make sense for you as you're part of this group. And if you're new to the Habit Hub, I just want to thank you for hanging out with me as I figure this out. And I am all ears for what would be supportive to you. And I look forward to seeing you next week. But please do drop in the comments what stands out for you and what you're committed to creating now that you know these top 5 ways to move you forward with your health this spring. Take good care. Bye-bye.